Hi, everyone, and welcome to God's Plan, Your Part, a podcast where our goal is to read the entire Bible in a year, seeking to understand God's plan of redemption while discovering daily and practically your part in it.
Can you think of someone in your own life who was faithful to God and that spoke loudly to you? They maybe didn't even ever tell you about God. You just saw their lives and knew that they were following Jesus, and you were encouraged because of it. One of the things that I would really like to see you do, literally today, I want you to take some time and think through the people that you have seen be faithful to God. And maybe some of you have many people on that list. Maybe some of you have just a few people. Maybe you can barely think of anyone. But I want you to spend some time today, please, thinking through people that have been faithful, and you got to see their faith, and you were encouraged by their faith. And actually, you are stronger in your faith because of their faithfulness. Have you heard the word faith enough? Today we're looking at Hebrews chapter 11, and actually through 13. So we're doing 11 to 13. We're finishing out the book of Hebrews today. But a lot of people call this chapter the Hall of Faith. You're going to hear the word faith a lot, and I do really want to encourage you to do what I asked, like think through who you have seen be faithful. And think through the impact that their faithfulness had on your life. And the extra credit is, please, please, please tell that person, when you come up with your list, when you come up with those examples, take a little bit of time and tell that person that you are thankful because of their faith. Now, some of the people you might think of have already passed on, but some might still be living, and I'm sure they would love to hear from you. So take a minute, send them a message, text them, call them, get together with them, buy them some coffee. I don't care what you do, but tell them how thankful you are. Hebrews 11 is an incredible example of the power that people's individual faithfulness has on all of us as a community of believers. So obviously we're starting here in Hebrews 11, keeping in mind that this book is written to Jewish believers. You might be sick of hearing this at this point, but you will see how the author of Hebrews just walks through the stories that the people would have been very familiar with. This is their family story. This is their story of their ancestors. The author of Hebrews is going to walk through this story and talk about individual examples of powerful faithfulness and how those people have set an example for us to follow. Because when we follow their faithfulness, we set an example for the people that will come after us. Some of you might have kids. Some of you might have grandkids. I'm sure you're already well aware of those who come after you and what the level of their faithfulness is. I'm sure you would love it if they look at the way you live your life and they are encouraged in their faith. So I love Hebrews 11. I think it's probably one of my favorite chapters in the whole Bible. I have a couple of favorites. I always feel bad when I say one chapter is more favorite of mine than another one. That just feels a little bit wrong. But I love these stories. So I'm just going to start from the top. I'm not going to hit every single one. But if you look at chapter 11, verse 5, the author talks about Enoch by faith was taken up so that he should not see death. Enoch is listed in Genesis. He walked with God. That's like a powerful term that is used for Enoch, meaning that he was faithful to God in all circumstances, and God allowed him to skip death. He was just taken up into heaven. He's one of the very few people that has experienced that, and we're kind of kicking off the story with Enoch. There is some comments about Abel before that. Then if you go down to verse 8, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. This is incredible because Abraham did not know God. God just showed up and called Abraham out. This is actually a powerful witness to God choosing us and electing us, not to be too controversial, but Abraham was not seeking God. God found him, and Abraham responded to God in obedience by faith, leaving the life he knew into a life he didn't know so that he could honor a God who he did not yet know. And what a powerful testament that is. This is not the last thing we're going to hear about Abraham. We're also going to hear about Abraham. This is verse 17. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. Another crazy step of faith. Abraham and Sarah had prayed for a son for so long, and God had promised a son to Abraham and Sarah and said that they would have so many descendants they couldn't be counted, that all nations of the world would be blessed through their descendants. Then they have a son, Isaac, and God says, hey, I want you to sacrifice Isaac. This is wild. And Abraham does what God asks. If you're familiar with the story, God ends up providing a sacrifice at the last minute. But the author of Hebrews is saying that Abraham believed that God could raise his son from the dead if he wanted to, and Abraham was faithful. Now look at verse 23. There's going to be a couple things about Moses. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents. This is Moses' parents' faithfulness. They knew there was something unique about their son. They obviously loved their son, like many of us do, and they wanted to protect him. So they hid him, and God used their decision to obviously further his plans in his kingdom. Verse 24 says, by faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. This is another developing theme that you'll see here in Hebrews 11. People who could live simple, easy, sometimes like really wealthy lifestyles, but reject those lifestyles because they would draw them away from God, and they choose difficult lifestyles instead. That's what Moses is doing. I think that is still what we're called to today, and I do want you to hear me on that. Like I think we are called to reject the relative comfort around us, to embrace God's kingdom instead. We don't want to be blessed for being fake. We want to be blessed for being faithful to God. We want to enjoy relationship with God. We don't want to enjoy the spoils that the world has to offer. Then you can go down further. Verse 27, by faith he left Egypt. Again, leaving what he knew to go somewhere where he didn't. And he was not afraid of the anger of the king. By faith, this is verse 29, the people crossed the Red Sea on dry land. But the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. So God honored the faithfulness of the entire nation of Israel by splitting the Red Sea and protecting his people. And then the author is just going to go through this list. And what more shall I say? For time would fail to tell you of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets. And then he talks about just these crazy things that happened to God's people. So here's what I want you to hear from me. As followers of Jesus, we are not citizens of this world. And it is very, very tempting to think that we are. But this world is not our home. And if you look at Hebrews 11, you get a list of people who understood they did not belong to the world that they could see. They belong to the world of God's promise. They belong to God's kingdom. And because of that, the world rejected them. And in many circumstances, the world hated them. They weren't seeking that. They didn't desire that. But their citizenship in heaven was always more important than their citizenship on earth. Now, later on, the author of Hebrews is going to ask us to live at peace with all people. So we are not supposed to be actively antagonistic towards the world around us. We are not supposed to be stirring up people around us to strife, but we are not supposed to find our confidence in the kingdoms that we are a part of. So if you're listening to this in the United States, if you're listening to this in the UK, if you're listening to this in Canada, like we're hitting several countries with this podcast. Wherever you live, if you are a follower of Jesus, your primary residence and your primary allegiance is not to those kingdoms, it is to God's kingdom. And when we seek God's kingdom, the kingdoms around us tend to benefit because we are being faithful. I think about Daniel. Daniel was not obedient all the time to the Babylonian Empire, but the Babylonian Empire was protected because of Daniel. Same thing for Joseph. Joseph was not always honoring to the Egyptian system, but the Egyptian nation benefited because the faithfulness of Joseph and the obedience of Joseph. So I think it's interesting. The reason I encourage you to think of faithful people that you know, I want you to thank those people for their faithfulness, for their encouragement, because a lot of times people don't know the impact that they've had on somebody else. But I also want to encourage you, and this is a clear your part for today, I also want to encourage you to live by faith every moment of every day. Be obedient to God. Do not compromise. It's so wild how our world today, like it's almost like the primary value of our culture is compromise. Refuse to compromise. Continue to serve the Lord. Continue to have strong faith in Jesus. That's what I'm asking you to do today. And I think I'm being like a little bit more pointed, a little bit more bold than usual. But that's the same thing that the author of Hebrews was doing. He's saying, please stick to it. Continue to honor Christ with your life. And when you do that, you walk in the same kind of faith that this enormous list of people who have come before us live by faith. If you look at the beginning of chapter 12, it actually says, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So just to paraphrase these verses, we are surrounded by this audience of people who have been faithful before us. And they are encouraging us as we press on toward the goal. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Be encouraged in your faith. Don't let anybody drag you away from the Lord. Don't let anybody hold you back from the Lord. Don't let your own sin hold you back from the Lord. Throw it off and pursue Jesus. So that's your part. Do everything you can to get closer and closer to Jesus. I hope this podcast has been helping you do that. I hope there is a community of believers around you that can help you do that. And ultimately, I hope your own relationship with Jesus is helping you do that, because when we are faithful, we set an example to follow for the next generation. And this hall of faith that we see in Hebrews 11 just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Remember, you are not a citizen of the kingdoms that you live in. You're a citizen of heaven. So live today like you're a citizen of heaven. We'll be back again tomorrow. We're looking at 2 Timothy. I'll see you then. Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.